All right. So yeah, this was such a treat to get Anna's email inquiry, and always fun when a topic like this lands on National Eating Disorder Awareness Week. What a unique way to sort of spend our time together talking about such a very specific niche, within the eating disorder topic. And I know we have a classroom of students with us, and then because I sent the invitation out to other dietetic educators, I know we have students and faculty joining us and interns, from all over the country, which is so much fun to all be able to come together on and talk about a topic that maybe many of us find interesting. So thanks again to the Eating Disorder Awareness Group at Metro State. I did my master's and doctoral degree at Colorado State. So I spent, 5 years of my life in Colorado, and they were great 5 years. And my son was actually born there. So Colorado will always hold a special place in my heart. So here's my plan for our time together today. I'm going to cover motivational interviewing, but really briefly, and spend more time talking about the use of MI in eating disorder treatment, which, spoiler alert, there isn't a lot of great evidence for the use of MI in eating disorder treatment. So I'm going to spend a lot more time talking about motivational interviewing in the realm of eating disorder prevention. I'll share with you a little bit about the health coaching program I run here at my own university and how I train my own students in MI and using MI in a way that is more in the realm of eating disorder prevention. And that brings us to that topic of weight-centric versus weight-inclusive approaches. And I want to give you all some very specific, tangible strategies that hopefully you can walk away being able to do after our hour together. Understanding, of course, that becoming proficient in motivational interviewing is a lifelong journey. But I recognize that we all come today to this webinar at different levels of exposure, knowledge, skills, abilities in motivational interviewing. So every good talk starts out with a learning objective slide. So here are some of the learning objectives for you all today. I'm hoping that you can walk away having a general sense of the evidence or lack thereof for MI in eating disorder treatment spaces, but also walk away with some very tangible strategies of how to talk about clients' weight concerns with them in a way that does not promote eating disorder or disordered eating, and instead hopefully reduces or prevents and helps them find ways to honor and respect their bodies in other ways. So I'd love to just start off today kind of knowing my audience a little bit. I know it's I see a lot of Zoom squares, but what is your current level of understanding of MI? And I know the classroom that's with us hasn't quite gotten to motivational interviewing yet in terms of the course content. And so you may be sort of in that realm, like, MI, motivational interviewing, like heard of it. That's about all I know. All the way to, yeah, I teach this at my university. And so you may be quite experienced. So I invite you to put in the chat box A, B, C, or D, which best represents your current experiences with motivational interviewing. And honestly, because I was tasked or charged to kind of talk about MI and eating disorders, I don't have a ton of time to talk about the basics of motivational interviewing today. So I'm going to fly through an MI basics, and this is going to be sort of an advanced course. So you may want to get the recording and then learn MI and then come back and watch this recording later if this is kind of a new concept for you. So thanks for putting that in the chat box. So it looks like kind of all over. So we got some C's and B's. Yeah. A's. So, and a few D's, we got some experts in the room. Awesome. Great. So as I suspected, right, a big range of MI basic knowledge. So in a nutshell, motivational interviewing was developed by Miller and Rolnick, and they are actually just about to publish the 4th edition of their book. So it's been around for several decades. And it's morphed and changed over the years based on scientific evidence. So more and more studies come out about MI, but also about what's effective about MI. And then that sort of guides some tweaks and changes and nuances that have happened over the years in the field of MI. But the general vibe of motivational interviewing hasn't changed greatly in the last several decades. And that is that it's always been collaborative, goal-oriented style of communication where you're really coming alongside the client. And instead of telling them what to do or why they should do it, you're asking for their ideas about why they might be interested in change. And in doing so, in inviting them to share their reasons for change, you're strengthening their personal motivation just in holding that conversation. And you're giving off this vibe or aura of partnership, like I'm right here with you, and, you know, I'm in it, and together, you know, we can kind of navigate this world and figure out what makes sense to you as far as changes that you want to explore, and really treating the client as the expert. They're in charge. And so you're demonstrating acceptance, like I accept you, whether you make a change, whether you don't make a change. You're a valuable human being in my eyes. And so that really is a game changer, because instead of this, like you need to, and you should do this, right? It's more about, no, you know yourself best, and you know what works best for you. And I'm curious for you to share, you know, what are some of the reasons you've been thinking about this change? And so you're giving off this vibe of compassion. That last word, evocation, just refers to you're asking questions that get them to think about why they might be interested in making a change. And them just sharing those reasons actually boosts their motivation, especially when they hear you as the practitioner speak those reasons back to them. So you might have heard about the ORs if you've learned anything about motivational interviewing. And so the practitioner learns how to use open-ended questions to invite the client, you know, to share their reasons for change, to share their ideas for how they might go about change. We use affirmations where whenever we hear the client's strengths, personal characteristics or qualities, we name them, like, oh, wow, you have a lot of perseverance, or you really have thought creatively about some solutions to this dilemma that you're in. So we just sort of tune our ears to notice the strengths that they might possess that could help them along, and then speak those back so they can hear that they have what it takes to be successful with change. And then we use a lot of reflective practice. So speaking back what we hear them say, and in doing so, they hear, wow, I can do this. I do have the things. I do have great reasons to want to make a change. So we use reflections and summaries in that sort of reflective practice to hold. It's like holding up a mirror, and it's saying, you know, see, you do have, I'm right here, and you have what it takes to be successful. And using reflective practice also creates empathy. Like you just, in trying to show that you care, and you're reflecting back, and you're showing you're curious about them, and that you care about them, and you're trying to make sure I'm right here, and I want to make sure I understand exactly what your experience is to the best that I can. So using those ORs to really move the conversation forward, and you're sprinkling in some questions, sprinkling in affirmations, and using a lot of reflective practice. And then the last piece of MI are the 4 processes, and the 4 processes kind of serve as a roadmap for a single session. And so you typically start a session with the engaging process, which means you're going to get to know the client, find out their story, hear more about them, find out more about their goals and values and what they're hoping to get out of the session. And then the focusing process, you know, what is that one change that you're interested in making? Or if they had a recent diagnosis or disease state, you might spend some time sort of unpacking or exploring that. And then, you know, what are all the changes that could be made to support managing that disease state? And out of all those changes, is there one change that the client feels most ready to make? So that's why it's called the focusing process. We invite the client to focus on a single behavior change area. And then the evoking process is where we ask why. We ask the why. Why do you want to make that change? How would making this change improve your situation? And get them to speak all of their personal reasons for change. And then often an appointment finishes off with the planning process, where they are invited to kind of think through their goals. What would it look like if they made a change? How often, do they want to do that? And think through all the pieces of the change. So that's MI on one slide. It's a lot more than everything I've just explained, but at least it gives you a great overview of how the technique works. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time providing some information about MI in eating disorder treatment based on when we look at Google Scholar and we look at the literature that exists on motivational interviewing in the use of treatment of eating disorders. And like I said, the story is kind of a sad story. I love MI. So when I look up this literature, it always just kind of makes me sad. But there have been 2 systematic reviews at this point, one in 2012 and one in 2022. And both looked at 13 different studies. And in that first systematic review, only 6 of the studies that they looked at where MI was used for eating disorder treatment, only 6 of them included a control group. And from those 6, only 1 study found that there were improved symptoms of eating disorders as a result of the MI that was used. Now, good news is 3 of the 6 studies did report a shift in readiness to change. And then in the more recent 2022 systematic review, we saw a very similar finding again. Out of the 13 studies, only 2 reported symptoms that reduced. So that's 11 studies that didn't find it was effective in that way. And 5 of those 13 studies, they did see an improvement in terms of readiness to sort of face treatment or to experience or pursue treatment with eating disorders. So if we take a bird's eye view of the literature, it seems like where MI might be most helpful in the eating disorder treatment realm is helping to raise importance for the patient who's maybe considering treatment and helping them move a step forward in that realm. Like, okay, maybe the way things are now aren't working for me. I don't really like how I'm feeling about food. I don't really like how I'm feeling about my body. Maybe I want to pursue treatment. But it seems like it's pretty ineffective when it comes to actually reducing or helping reduce symptoms once somebody's receiving treatment for an eating disorder. But that one conclusion bullet, I just want to say, what gives me pause about that is that we often make referrals, right? And so as future dietitians or dietitians, we really do have an opportunity to make a referral for a client that we're seeing who maybe we think, oh, I'm hearing a lot of red flags. I'm hearing a lot of disordered eating patterns. Maybe this is somebody who might benefit from seeing a specialist, specializes in eating disorders. And so using our MI skills in this case can become really powerful because the behavior change is sometimes meeting with that other professional that you're referring them to. So it helps, I think, to kind of, in those circumstances where you're hearing a lot of red flags and you can tell this patient is really struggling with eating disorder symptoms or patterns, perhaps we can think about, should the focus of this session, should the behavior change focus of the session be that this patient maybe pursues treatment? And it looks like there's evidence to support that could be a real effective use of MI with patients who are struggling. So in general, though, more research is needed, especially when combining motivational interviewing with other treatment therapies that are used in eating disorder treatment. So cognitive behavioral therapy, ACT is acceptance commitment therapy. We know DBT is being used in eating disorder treatment as well. So a lot more research is needed combining MI with these other treatments. But also, when you look at the literature, a lot of the systematic reviews kind of clump all of the eating disorders together. So anorexia, bulimia, and then, the subclinical, what used to be called EDNOS or not otherwise specified, those, and binge eating disorder, those are all very different. And so looking just more research on each of the different types of eating disorders, I think is also needed moving forward. So I'm going to spend the rest of our time together talking more about MI in eating disorder prevention, because of what I just shared. There isn't a lot of research on MI in eating disorder treatment, and the research isn't super strong at this point. And I have an opportunity to kind of share with you some work I'm doing at my university as well in this realm, because you may be wondering, it may not be that MI helps people reduce their eating disorder symptoms in that recovery space, but could motivational interviewing be used in a way that improves someone's relationship with food and body in general, just like without maybe that person's not experiencing an eating disorder, but can MI improve a person's relationship with food or body in general? And if so, then that can really support that whole eating disorder prevention realm, right? So I think it's interesting when we deliver motivational interviewing interventions to use measures like intuitive eating scale or the Satter eating competence inventory or the body appreciation scale, and maybe look at do these things kind of change, or could they change or improve as a result of receiving an intervention that includes motivational interviewing. So as Anna mentioned, I run a health coaching program at my university called UCAN, which stands for University Coaching for Activity and Nutrition. But actually our program goes kind of beyond that. We're just a real generic sort of health coaching program. So in addition to nutrition and physical activity, we also invite conversation about stress management and sleep patterns, and body image. So the way the program works is I have undergraduate, senior level, junior and senior level undergrad students who have completed my nutrition counseling and education course, and then graduate students who have completed my motivational interviewing semester-long course, who sign up to be UCAN health coaches. And it's a volunteer experience. Unfortunately, I wish I could pay them all, but they only health coach 3 hours a week. And it just gives them a great resume builder, a great experience. And then we meet every week to review our client cases. And then they also receive audio recording supervision. So they do audio recordings of their session and then receive feedback on those recordings. And so recently we just finished up a study where we took those recordings and we got the client's permission, of course, and we sent those recordings to a lab, and they were able to assess our MI fidelity, meaning the health coaches say they're using MI, but are they actually using MI? And the lab sent us back the coding results that showed us, yes, for the most part, they're doing a pretty good job of actually using MI. And the client can sign up for a single session, but for us, we're researching the clients that sign up for the 6-session series. And then we have them do pre and post surveys. And so more recently, we did this study where we looked at eating competence at the beginning before they did these sessions, and then at the end. And we also looked at body appreciation as well. And my PhD student, Nicole Squires, who is on this call, she's been working really hard on getting this paper ready for submission. So we haven't quite submitted it yet, but we're going to in about 2 weeks. And we did we did have positive findings. So participants did increase their eating competence as a result of these 6 MI sessions. And they did increase in their body appreciation as a result of these 6 sessions. So I included intuitive eating scale as another instrument, but that's not one we used for this particular study, but it certainly is a great scale that could be used to kind of see if this is possible. And motivational interviewing training, of course, they have over 45 hours of MI training, but also they're trained in weight inclusive approaches. So when clients show up and they express concerns about their weight, how do I hold a conversation with that client in a way that doesn't perpetuate disordered eating, but instead invites them to think about all the pieces of their health puzzle. So I'll talk more about that. So our students here at NAU are trained in weight inclusive approaches. And if that's a new term for you today, I have this slide that kind of explains, here's what weight inclusive means, here's what weight normative means, or weight centric. So a traditional weight centric approach, and that's certainly how I was trained as a dietitian over 20 years ago. I was trained, just help patients lose weight, right? How hard is it? Just help patients lose weight and they will experience, a reduction in disease risk. And so that's a great idea, right? And patients, if they work hard enough, they can just lose weight, right? And that will help them prevent disease, that will help treat disease, like that's just the go-to. And then after working with patients myself, I discovered that that patients usually do a lot of weight cycling. Like they lose weight and then they regain it, and then they feel worse about themselves. And so I discovered just from being an outpatient dietitian, like it doesn't work. And it doesn't really matter all of my MI tricks in the book. In the long run, my patients were losing weight and then regaining weight. And so I actually at Colorado State, the eating disorder dietitian there shared with me more about intuitive eating and a weight inclusive approach. And that was where my journey started about 18 years ago. And so weight inclusive approaches is really about taking the focus off the scale and instead focusing on improving a person's relationship with food, removing moral judgments about food, building awareness of hunger and fullness, thinking about health from both like emotional mental health space and a physical health space, and honoring and centering those things instead of, trying to change or manipulate body shape or size. Of course, this journey also involves advocating for the removal of weight stigma and doing whatever we can to minimize, prevent, eliminate weight stigma from society. And also acknowledge that there is a natural genetic variation in body size. And so it's normal and okay and beautiful that we're all different when it comes to body shape and size. And so those are some of the concepts that I teach my students when I'm also teaching motivational interviewing, with the idea that college students who they are providing health coaching for really struggle in all of these things, in accepting their bodies. They often present with a lot of disordered patterns and habits and thoughts. And our health coaching program makes a lot of referrals for eating disorder symptomology. So it's really important to me that our students are very well-versed in weight inclusive approaches, because because college students are our target audience, especially, we want to do whatever we can to prevent disordered eating. Our health coaching program also serves faculty and staff, by the way. We serve students, faculty, and staff, but students are the majority of the clients that we see in our campus health coaching program. So I'm going to kind of switch gears and really move on to like giving you all some tangible skills, like how do I take what I know about MI and maybe use it with some more specific skills when I have a patient who wants to lose weight. Like, how do I hold space for that concern and not poo-poo it or brush it off or pretend like they didn't say it, and yet still, introduce them to a weight inclusive approach while respecting their autonomy, because autonomy is a big concept in motivational interviewing. So your client says, I want to lose weight, or you ask, what brings you in today? And sometimes it's a consult from the doctor for weight management, or sometimes it's them saying they want this. And of course, we need to unpack the why. Like, why does weight feel important to you? Which I'll get to in a second. But really, when you think about why a person would want to lose weight, usually their reasons are they believe they need to lose weight in order to improve their health, or they believe they need to lose weight in order to feel better about their body. Or maybe they feel like weight loss is the only way to feel accepted by their peers or their family members. And of course, if they're on the receiving end of weight stigma, people are saying horrible things to them about their weight, or shaming them, or telling them they need to lose weight. Of course, they don't want that, right? So it makes sense that weight loss seems like the easy answer for solving all of these things that they view as problems, right? And they don't realize that these things are all possible. You can improve health, you can improve body image, you can improve feeling accepted, and you can even experience less internalized weight stigma, even when weight loss doesn't happen. And so that's a real piece of like education, right, that we could provide patients and clients. So in general, what I'm saying is that your client doesn't know that you can't determine health status based on weight or BMI, that BMI is actually like not a great way to assess health status, because health is way more complex than BMI, and because BMI is limited. We all know all the ways that it's limited, right? Your client also doesn't know that for the most part, research shows that when people try to lose weight, they end up gaining it, right? That pursuit of weight loss is actually associated with weight gain. And they also don't know that losing weight's not necessary to improve health. You can actually improve health biomarkers and lab values without changing body weight. They don't know that you can actually improve body image without losing weight, because really you're working on changing the way you think about your body, and that it's not even necessary to lose weight in order to improve body image. And that for a lot of people, they maybe start off losing weight thinking, oh, my body image is going to get better. And it never does, because they just want to lose more and more weight. And they just keep saying, well, maybe another 5 pounds, then I'll love my body, right? So it doesn't even work a lot of times. And they don't know that pursuing weight loss can lead to obsession with the scale. It could lead to obsessive thoughts about food, disordered eating patterns. And of course, anytime you ask somebody, or most of the time when you ask somebody to share their eating disorder story, it often starts with a diet, right? So it's especially dangerous to pursue weight loss when you think about it from that perspective, especially given, the mortality rates of eating disorders. So while weight is associated with increased morbidity and mortality, we know there's associations there in every study that looks for associations between weight and chronic disease and weight and mortality. They see associations, except for the few studies that control for all these other confounding variables. So when you look at studies that control for things like fitness level, when you look at studies that control for things like even weight stigma, poverty, you start to realize that the weight health puzzle is much more complex. And so your client doesn't know all that necessarily, right? They're just told by the media, by their doctors, by, maybe several sources that weight is bad and weight worsens health, and therefore you need to fix it by losing weight. And so, of course, their desire for weight loss stems from a societal stigma that is multifaceted and comes from all these different directions. So this is the big question. Knowing all of that, how do we hold space for the client's desire to lose weight? Understanding, of course, that this desire is a result of our thin, obsessed culture. And of course, is something that would happen when there's mistreatment of people in larger bodies. So how do we like hold space for that, understanding where they're coming from, while also addressing misinformation about weight and health so that they have correct information. And then at the end of the day, assisting the clients who are interested in making changes, in adopting self-care patterns that honor their physical health, but also honor that emotional well-being part. So I know it's a really long question, right? You might need to read it a couple times, but in general, how do we hold space and honor and acknowledge their weight concerns while also introducing them to some weight inclusive concepts? Using motivational interviewing, where we're, at the end of the day, we're accepting them and we're supporting their autonomy. So really, motivational interviewing was designed for people who are feeling ambivalent. It's a communication technique that's designed for people who have mixed feelings about a change. Like, I kind of want to make a change and I kind of don't, right? And so the spirit of MI, or that vibe that you give off, is perfect for someone who's sitting on the fence, right? If you're sitting on the fence about a change, like, I kind of want to get to bed early tonight and I kind of want to watch my next Netflix, get my Netflix binge on. When you're on the fence, if I were to sit here and be like, no, you just need to go to bed. Like, really? Why are you even thinking about Netflix? Like, you need to go to bed. The concept is that doesn't work very well, and it actually makes patients shut down. Like, don't tell me what to do, right? I'll go to bed if I want to go to bed, right? And so the idea is, if we come about it from like the back door of like, yeah, you could go to bed early, you could not, like, it's really up to you, but let's just talk it out. Let's like together kind of brainstorm, what are the pros of doing this? What are the cons? And give them that space to kind of think through, what are their reasons for wanting more sleep? How do you feel on the days that you're more rested? And really spend some time there. Then the client tends to lean forward instead of leaning back. Like, instead of don't tell me what to do, they're going to be more in this stance of like wanting to be part of this conversation, wanting to be here for it. And they're going to feel a lot less judged because they're not being told what they should do, right? So the 4 processes of MI, which I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, are this engage, focus, evoke, plan. Like I said, if you've had some MI training already, you know these 4 processes. And so again, I'm kind of coming into this like you have a sense of this, but again, this is the roadmap of a session. So if I start off an appointment, I've got a client who wants to lose weight, right? And in the first 10 minutes of that appointment, I really want to spend some time getting to know that client, right? I want to find out all about them. I want to hear about their hobbies. I want to hear what their interests are. I might want to hear about their careers or their career aspirations. So the purpose of that engaging conversation, or that rapport building conversation, is to get to know them and to hear their story. But also, this is a great time to explore their goals. They might have goals related to their health. They might have goals related to their well-being, and also their values. Like, what do you care most about in this season of your life? And hopefully you kind of end this process or end this conversation with what are you hoping to walk away with, or have a good sense of, or how can I help you, in this time that we have together? So I listed just some of the real common questions that I teach students in general about the engaging process. Here's some questions to ask in those first few minutes when you're getting to know the client, right? Now, let's say your client, though, brings up, you ask, like, what brought you in, or what led you to make this appointment? And they say, well, I want to lose weight. So within that engaging process, you really have the opportunity to dive deeper into this concern about their weight. And that's kind of where we break off. That's the purpose of this webinar, is like, hey, so how do I address clients who want to lose weight? How do I hold space for them without pushing them into disordered eating realm. And so we want to unpack and explore their weight concerns. We want to find out really what are they hoping weight loss will bring them. And we might get some surface level answers. Like if you ask, why do you want to lose weight? And they might be like, well, because I really need to for my health, right? We might get those kind of answers at first. But if we were to unpack and dig a little deeper, oftentimes it really comes, this desire to change your body shape or size often comes from this desire just to be loved, to experience belonging, to feel accepted by the people in your life. And unfortunately, because weight stigma is so prevalent in our society, like this is real, these are very real feelings for people, right? And again, they don't know that weight loss isn't the only way to get there. Like they see this castle on a hill and they're like, I want that castle, right? But if they were to actually like go up the hill, it'd be starts and stops and weight cycling and yo-yo dieting and disordered eating, right? And they don't realize, hey, there's actually another way up this hill that involves changing the way you think about yourself, and really kind of changing the path altogether. And so that's where with MI, we have an opportunity to introduce that new path. So here are some of the engaging questions. This was one of my learning objectives. So here's like a really key point. This is what I wanted you to walk away with. I created this formula. I just made it up. I mean, I don't know if it's helpful for anyone, but whenever I teach my students this, I said, when a client shares that they have weight concerns, I want your brain immediately to go to the why, when, who, how. Why, when, who, how, why, when, who, how, why, when, who, how. And that's how they're supposed to kind of remember this sequence of engaging questions. So the first question is, why do you want to lose weight, right? And really unpack that, find out all the reasons, not just the first reason. When do you first remember feeling dissatisfied with your body? Like, take me back, tell me the story, right? What was the first day? What happened? What was going on at that time? And then who in your life has kind of contributed to you feeling this way? And it could be an uncle, it could be a mother, and it could be society. Like they really could be able to name a specific person, but they may not be able to. They may just say, I don't know. I just started comparing my body to other people in middle school and realized I was different. And so, but it's just helpful to kind of unpack all of that. And then the how, like, what have you tried in the past? And how has it gone? Like what's worked, what's not worked, unpack all of that. What are some different diets you've tried? What did you notice about yourself? And so you're really taking the time. I think those first 4 questions are just hearing their story, inviting their story into the conversation. And then this last question I have is what if? And this may or may not be the right time for this question. So you'll just kind of have to listen to them, reflect back what you hear, see how the conversation goes. But at some point during that conversation with that client, you may end up trying this question on, which is, what if you were able to experience improved health? What if you're able to experience belonging, acceptance? You had great energy during the day, but the scale never budged. Like, what if? What would that feel like? What would that be like? And you're usually often going to get a lot of emotion from clients when you ask that question, because maybe they're having that thought for the very first time. And there's often a grieving process with grieving that body maybe they've always wanted, or grieving this pivot that they might make away from pursuing diets when maybe they've been pursuing diets for 20 years. So of course, allowing that sadness and grief to exist in the room, but inviting them to just kind of be vulnerable with you and think about what that might feel like. And so as you're kind of wrapping up this engaging process and hearing all these pieces, a summary is such a great way to show, I've been listening this whole time, and here are some of the key themes that I've been hearing. And so a summary is really just kind of speaking back. And you can even add on to it, like, Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I really appreciate your authenticity, your vulnerability. What I'm hearing is a story that started back in middle school, and you're just kind of like piecing, you don't have to share the whole story, but just like put in pieces just to show I'm right here. I didn't miss a beat. I heard your whole story and I heard how it affected you. Right. And I'm ending here with, and you want things to be different. Right? You want to live in a world where you're not worried about your body anymore and you don't worry and stress about food anymore. And so I think that's a real beautiful way to end that engaging conversation. Because again, your client believes weight loss is achievable and that it's going to solve all their problems. But really, that is a form of misinformation, right? And in the book that I wrote with my friend Laura, Motivational Interviewing and Nutrition and Fitness, we have a whole chapter on the topic of addressing misinformation, because that's half of a dietitian's job, right? Like patients and clients come in with a certain amount of information that they got off the internet. How do we correct their misinformation, but in an MI adherent way? And it's really hard, right? It's not easy to do that. It really pushes us out of our comfort zone. But I think it helps when you can kind of see their desire to lose weight or their belief that weight loss is necessary is really misinformation. So if a patient came in and said, I'm having a hard time sleeping at night, I think I'm going to just do 2 shots of whiskey every night to fall asleep. Would you be like, okay, great, sounds good, see you next time? Like, right? No, you'd be like, on the inside, you'd be like, wait, what are you doing? Right. And on the outside, using MI, you would say things like, oh, interesting. How do you think that might go for you? Like, what might happen? Do you have any concerns about that as like your main technique for falling asleep? Right. You kind of unpack it, explore it. If they couldn't name any concerns, if they're like, no, I think it's brilliant, I think I've never thought of a better idea ever in my life, then all you're kind of left with is, well, I have some concerns about that approach. Is it okay if I share those with you? Right? So we ask for their concerns. If they don't have any, we ask permission, and then we share our concerns. And then we check in with them. What do you think about what I just shared? So that's how I would handle someone who said they wanted to do 2 shots of whiskey to fall asleep at night. And my approach to someone who wants to lose weight isn't that different. Does that make sense? It's like, it's still just kind of misinformation because they don't have the whole picture. They don't know all the scientific literature that we do, right? Because what the scientific literature shows is that people get stuck in this dieting cycle where they start a diet and they're like, I'm going to be really good, right? And this one's going to be different. And then they get into it and they're like, oh, shoot, I miss this food. I miss Girl Scout cookies, right? And then, oh, what I wouldn't give for and then they start worrying, obsessing about that food. Oh, now I'm going to a party and that food's going to be available. And so maybe they overeat it. And then they're like, well, shoot, there goes my diet. Oh gosh, I'm a failure. And then like they start another one sometimes the next day even, so this dieting cycle, there's evidence to support this dieting cycle happens, and it's what a lot of people go through. So I show my health coaches, we have this in our health coaching office, this diagram, just to show clients like this cycle, and just to be able to say like, can you relate to this? And it really opens a lot of people up like, oh my gosh, I've done that so many times, right? So it's just a nice visual aid to just kind of introduce this concept that this is really what dieting often results in, right? So in terms of addressing misinformation using motivational interviewing, one of the techniques that MI trainers recommend is this elicit, provide, elicit technique. You've probably heard of this if you've learned MI, like sandwich what you want to share in between 2 open-ended questions. You heard that? Another way to ask or to say it is ask, offer, ask. Like I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to give you information, and then I'm going to ask you another question. So if you were saying, okay, this person believes weight loss is the answer, I think that might be misinformation because it's a lot more complex than that. you could use this elicit, provide, elicit to introduce this concept. And again, this comes after I've unpacked. I've unpacked the why, the when, the who, the how, right? And so now I'm kind of starting to switch gears like, hey, this might be a great time to kind of share this different approach, this back door to that castle, right? That back different path. So you might ask, you might just kind of say, I would love to share with you how I like to approach this topic with patients, right? But first, I want to hear from you. The approach I use is called a non-diet approach. What do you know about that? Or what have you heard about a non-diet approach? Or what have you heard about intuitive eating? Or what have you heard about, use whatever non-diet, anti-diet term you would like. And so you give them a chance to kind of share what they already know, because if you're about to provide information, you don't want to just repeat back everything they already know, right? And then an ask permission question, like, is it okay if I share with you a little bit more about how I like to help clients who are struggling in this area? And then you're going to provide little nuggets. You don't have to tell the whole health at every size, weight inclusive, anti-diet story. You just provide whatever nuggets of wisdom that you think might be helpful based on what they've already shared about their story. And then you're going to check in like, hey, what did you think about what I just shared? Or how does what I just shared relate to your own experience? And it could be that the provide is simply showing them this diagram. Like, hey, I've noticed that a lot of people who diet kind of go through this cycle. Can you relate to that? Or like, how do you relate to what I'm sharing with you? So that could be it. That could be the only thing you do for that provide. It's really important though, at the end, that you communicate autonomy, right? So this is the approach that I take with patients. But I want you to hear that it's really up to you, what you decide to do, and you know yourself best. And if you'd like to go a different road, I can provide referrals to other folks who will take that road with you. So that's how I recommend emphasizing autonomy in that. Like, I'm still going to do my counseling from a weight inclusive lens. I'm not going to negotiate on that because I don't want to encourage people drinking whiskey at night. Like, I don't want to encourage the thing that I think is harmful. But I'd be happy to give this person a referral, right, to another person. Other things, other nuggets of wisdom that could go in that provide, right? There's so many little nuggets, isn't there? If you've learned about intuitive eating or weight inclusive or non-diet health at every size, you've learned like it's complicated, right? So this is just a slide of all the things that could go in that elicit, provide, elicit, in that provide spot. So what I have my students do is I have them practice their elicit, provide, elicit before they see their first patient or client for our health coaching program. So like, okay, pretend I'm, somebody who just shared that they want to lose weight, and we've unpacked all the things, the who, what, when, why, where, and now you want to kind of share this alternative approach. Hit it, and then they have to do the elicit. Hey, Dawn, what do you know about a non-diet approach? I don't know. What's that, right? And then they have to practice saying the nuggets, because I think that's the only way to kind of like get through some of the awkwardness of this, and then finish off with, what do you think about what I just shared? So I know we're kind of getting to the end here, and I want to make sure there's time for you all to ask questions, but after the engaging process comes the focusing process, where like, okay, I take a weight inclusive non-diet approach. You now know what that is, but what do you want to talk about for the session? Like, is there any change that you're interested in exploring with me today? And so this focusing or finding that one behavior change kind of comes after all of that. And this again is something we have in our health coaching office that is just a list of some topics. Like, here are all the different things that we could talk about in terms of actual behavior changes that we feel supports physical health and emotional well-being. Is there anything on here that jumps out at you as a place to start today with your own, based on whatever you've got kind of going on or whatever your concerns are? So it's like, we've already kind of shared, you may or may not, your weight may or may not change when you make these changes. And so we can do some body image counseling or coaching on that. But yeah, what are, just when you think about the changes you're wanting to make, what makes sense to you in terms of moving forward? Oops, sorry about that. And then once the client picks that area of change, then we want to be sure to do some evoking. The evoking process is when we ask the why. Why did you pick? So let's say they pick under mindful eating, they pick savoring food. Now that I think about it, I eat too fast. I really want to slow down and savor food. And so you might unpack that a little bit more. So why did you pick that area? If you did make a change in that area, how do you think it would help you? If you slowed down and savored your food. If you got really good at mindful eating and you did this for 6 months, how do you think your life might be different 6 months from now, right? So we take time and pause and just kind of think about the why. And this is also a really important time to be reflecting back the change talk that the client speaks. And then we finish up that session with the planning process. Okay, you're going to savor your food. Is there a certain meal that you want to try that out at? How would it work? Take me through it. Where are you going to be when you eat that meal? Tell me about your dining environment. What could get in the way of you being successful in slowing down and being more mindful during that meal? What would a successful week look like when it comes to that change? So just to kind of reiterate, you're taking one behavior change from the focus. That's the focusing process. Like what's the one area you want to start working on? You're evoking change talk for it. Why do you want to make that change? Get them to list all their reasons, reflect it. And then how are you going to make that change? And invite them to think through all the pieces of the change journey. So remember that sometimes folks present and they have dieted a lot. They may have some very disordered eating habits, like where they're skipping meals or ignoring hunger on purpose because they're worried about their weight. And they've been doing it for a long time. So remember that each interaction with a patient is just an opportunity to plant seeds. And those seeds may or may not grow, right? You may be the 10th person who has talked about this gentler approach, or you may be the first person. And so they may just need more time to kind of ponder it, think about it. Maybe they'll look stuff up. Maybe they'll listen to some podcasts. So a lot of times patients do jump on the bandwagon when you first introduce it. They're like, oh my gosh, I have dieted so much. I'm so sick of it. I love what you're saying. Like we've literally gotten that response in our health coaching office. And then other times there's like, well, yeah, but I really am going to spring break and I'm going to be in a bathing suit, And so there's like a lot of language of like, yeah, I'm not interested in what you're selling. And so you're just going to get all across the map in terms of reactions and responses. But you can just, if they're interested in being on the journey, you can continue to work with them, right? And hopefully there's pieces of what you're sharing that resonate with them, but really lower your expectations of their reaction, understanding that, all you can really do is plant seeds and give them a space to think it through, and nourish the soil the best you can, but understand that a lot of it's out of your control, right? Because it's a journey and it's a lifelong journey to have a healthy relationship with food, to not stress about your weight. Like it's not something that happens overnight. And it does, like while we saw improvements in body appreciation across 6 sessions, there's still a long way to go, right? That's just kind of that initial experience. And we didn't collect follow-up data, so we don't even know if they maintain that body appreciation, 6 months later, which of course we need to do. We tried to collect follow-up data actually, but we definitely lost people to follow up. And remember too, you can always make referrals, and using MI to make referrals is a great idea, because that is, again, that can kind of become the focus of the appointment. If the patient's really struggling with some disordered eating patterns, and you can say, gosh, I'm hearing this, this, sounds like you're really struggling in these areas. And there are experts out there who really specialize in this specific work of people who really worry and think a lot more about their body and their weight than they want to. Would you be up for seeing someone else who can help you with this more specialized area? So remember that you don't have to do this work alone. And motivational interviewing is also a lifelong journey, getting good at it. So hopefully this gave you a little snapshot of what happens when you pair motivational interviewing with weight inclusive approaches, and also a little bit of information about eating disorder treatment with MI. And again, our main focus today was MI, using MI more in the realm of preventing eating disorders, which I think when you use weight inclusive approaches, you're really doing your due diligence to prevent eating disorders with that patient. So here's my contact information. Happy to hear from you. You can email me directly. And I love hearing from folks who have been in audiences of different things that I've delivered. You can follow me on Instagram. And I also have a YouTube channel. I know the instructors in the room sometimes use those videos, which I'm thrilled in their teaching. And also wrote those 2 books that are out there, if those interest you at all. And Laura and I are working on the 2nd edition of Motivational Interviewing in Nutrition and Fitness. But it'll be another year or 2 until that's done. But I welcome your questions at this time, and thanks for being such a great audience. So I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing. So if you want a picture of this or anything, last chance. All right, cool. All right, so maybe now, Anna, we could stop the recording so that people feel comfortable